Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Our top story: Iran seized a Chinese-owned tanker in the Gulf of Oman carrying Iranian oil. Analysts say the move may point to internal disputes over control of the country's oil exports. Could Washington and Beijing find common ground on Iran, Taiwan, and trade? We map out the fault lines between the world's two largest economies and what to expect from the upcoming summit. Taiwan passing a $25 billion special defense budget after months of infighting between its two major parties. Why some lawmakers say the budget weakens Taiwan's defense.
The opposition party trimmed isn't just the number, but the number of our interceptor missiles and the scale of drone fighting.
Britain says it will summon China's ambassador after two British nationals were convicted of spying for China, who were their targets. And a flag-raising ceremony in a Canadian town drew a warning letter from the Chinese embassy to the mayor.
I have never been told by a foreign authority or anyone in Canada to stop saying what I believe is true. We phoned the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and they came and they took the letter.
Iran has seized a Chinese-owned oil tanker in the Gulf of Oman carrying Iranian oil. It's accusing the vessel of trying to disrupt the country's oil exports amid growing tensions in the region. Iranian state media says naval forces boarded the tanker during what it called a special operation Friday. Iranian media identified the ship as the Ocean Koi, now called Jingli. According to Iranian state media, naval forces boarded the tanker in the Sea of Oman and escorted it to Iran's southern coast. Iran claims the Chinese-owned ship was acting against the country's oil export interests. Some analysts say the seizure may have been tied to internal disputes within Iran's complex oil trading networks over who controlled the cargo. The Ocean Koi has already been placed under U.S. sanctions since February for allegedly transporting Iranian oil. Because Iran faces heavy U.S. sanctions, its oil is often moved through indirect shipping routes to hide where it comes from. Shipping analysts say the tanker had recently loaded fuel oil off the coast of Oman, suggesting it may have been part of those types of transfers. Others believe a more likely explanation is a dispute over control of the cargo. Iran's oil export system is not run through a single chain of command. Instead, it involves different state-linked and private groups that don't always coordinate with each other. The seizure also comes during a period of rising tensions near the Strait of Hormuz, one of the world's most important oil shipping routes. In recent weeks, Chinese-linked oil tankers passing through the Strait of Hormuz have faced disruption. Some ships have been forced to delay, reroute, or even reverse course as tensions rose around the key waterway. Much of the disruption comes from broader instability, including increased Iranian military activity at the strait. In an incident earlier this week, a tanker with a Chinese crew was attacked while transiting the area. Beijing confirmed the attack Friday. Overall, Chinese oil flows have not stopped, but they are operating in unpredictable conditions in one of the world's most critical choke points. President Trump is traveling to China next week. It's his first face-to-face meeting with Chinese leader Xi Jinping in Beijing since 2017, around 9 years ago. With ongoing conflicts in the Middle East and a trade truce hanging by a thread, both sides are always drawing red lines on Taiwan and technology. We take you through the key issues at play and what policy experts are expecting from the summit.
We're going to have a meeting with President Xi. It's going to be, I think, quite amazing.
President Trump's planned visit to China was delayed by the Iran war, but the diplomatic pressure hasn't let up. Washington is now urging Beijing to use its influence over Tehran to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, a critical waterway for global shipping. Iran's foreign minister was in Beijing this week. Treasury Secretary Bessent and Secretary of State Rubio both made public appeals for China to protect freedom of navigation.
I hope the Chinese tell him what he needs to be told, and that is that what you are doing in the Straits is causing you to be globally isolated.
At the same time, Washington sanctioned a major Chinese refinery for handling Iranian crude, tightening the squeeze on Beijing's energy ties with Tehran. At midnight local time Friday, China sees its seventh increase in gasoline and diesel prices this year. Taiwan remains Beijing's top priority. China wants the U.S. to scale back arms sales to Taiwan. It is also urging Washington to oppose Taiwanese independence. In response, U.S. lawmakers have taken a firm stance. Earlier this month, a bipartisan group of senators introduced a resolution pushing back on Beijing's military posture toward the island. Republican Senator Pete Ricketts said the U.S. must, quote, deter communist China and stand with our partners and allies. Earlier this week, Secretary Rubio said a conflict over Taiwan would serve neither side's interests.
We don't need any destabilizing events to occur with regards to Taiwan or anywhere in the Indo-Pacific.
On trade, the two countries remain in a tariff truce, but it's fragile. U.S. Trade Representative Jameson Greer has signaled that President Trump is seeking stability, not a full reset. That marks a notable shift. Early in the second term, the Trump administration talked about fundamentally rebalancing trade and imposed tariffs on Chinese goods of up to 145%. Beijing is now pushing for further reductions, especially on the levies tied to fentanyl. According to Reuters, Trump plans to bring a smaller than usual delegation of CEOs to Beijing, including executives from NVIDIA, Apple, and Boeing. Boeing CEO Kelly Ortberg said in April that any new agreement with China is, quote, 100% dependent on the state of U.S.-China relations. Artificial intelligence is becoming one of the sharpest edges of this rivalry. White House Science and Technology Chief Michael Kratsios warned in April that China is stealing American AI technology at what he called industrial scale. President Trump said this week that America is leading the AI race.
And we're leading China in AI. And I'm going to go see President Xi in 2 weeks. I look forward to that, but I'll say I'm leading.
China, for its part, has already formally blocked Meta's acquisition of AI startup Manus, a China-founded company now based in Singapore. Rare earths remain China's sharpest economic leverage point, affecting U.S. defense manufacturing and automotive production. Beijing has eased some of export licensing procedures, but has kept the ability to tighten controls at any time. And on a separate front, more than 100 U.S. House members signed a letter to President Trump this week. They are calling on him to demand the unconditional release of Hong Kong media mogul and pro-democracy activist Jimmy Lai.
Analysts at the Center for Strategic and International Studies have framed the divide with a simple shorthand, 5 Bs versus 3 Ts. On Washington's side, the focus is on Boeing, beef, soybeans, a board of trade, and a board of investment. And on the Chinese side, the priorities are Taiwan, tariffs, and technology, with AI risk management now emerging as a fourth major priority for Beijing. Foreign policies analysts find that on the most sensitive strategic points, Taiwan, the Middle East, and export controls, the chances of any substantive agreement are slim. What the summit may be able to deliver is something more modest, clearer red lines between the two sides and more reliable channels for communication when things go wrong. The consensus among experts is that the measure of success for this summit is less about achieving a landmark deal and more about keeping the relationship from coming apart. Anger and frustration are mounting in Taiwan after its parliament passed a $25 billion special defense budget on Friday. The $25 billion is a compromise between the ruling party, which proposed a much larger package, and the opposition, which controls the parliament. The opposition succeeded in cutting nearly 40% of the original proposal.
The Special Act for the procurement of defense resilience and asymmetric combat capability programs is hereby adopted.
Lawmakers from the ruling party slammed the decision, saying it weakens Taiwan's defense.
The opposition party trimmed isn't just the number, but the number of our interceptor missiles and the scale of drone fighting.
The final budget only covers funding for arms purchases from the U.S. while cutting support for developing weapons domestically. One lawmaker from Taiwan's ruling party criticized the decision. He said that if Beijing were to block U.S. weapons deliveries during a conflict, Taiwan could struggle to maintain its munition supply and warfighting capability. Inside Taiwan's parliament, lawmakers from both parties fired sharp criticism and anger over the vote.
The special defense budget wasn't really proposed to build our military. It's just using national security as an excuse to breach the limit of our debt. Lawmakers from the Kuomintang party said that the defense budget is a waste of money. Keeping you guys at your job is a real waste of money.
Washington has been watching Taiwan's situation closely. Last month, the head of U.S. Indo-Pacific Command said Washington can't want Taiwan's defense more than Taiwan does. The budget passed just days before President Trump's visit to China. Taiwan is expected to be one of the top issues on the agenda. In another case of transnational repression at the hands of the Chinese Communist Party, Britain says it will summon China's ambassador after 2 men were convicted in London. They were convicted of spying on Hong Kong dissidents in the UK on behalf of China. Targets include Nathan Law, a pro-democracy Hong Kong activist. One of the convicted men, Peter Y., worked as a British immigration officer. Y. used police computer systems while off duty to gather information on dissidents. The other man worked in the office of Hong Kong's Economic and Trade Office in the UK. He also gathered intelligence on Hong Kong activists and politicians. Security Minister Dan Jarvis called the operation an infringement on British sovereignty. He added that activity like this would never be tolerated on UK soil. A flag-raising ceremony in Canada draws attention from an unusual source. Turning now to Amherstburg, just across the river from Detroit, where the mayor says he received a warning from China's consulate. The mayor says the message warned him to stop supporting the spiritual practice of Falun Dafa. He turned it over to the police and says it's the first time a foreign power tried to stop him from saying what he believes is true. Here's more on that story.
I, Michael Prue, Mayor, on behalf of the town of Amherstburg, do hereby proclaim May 13th, 2026, Falun Dafa Day in the town of Amherstburg.
Falun Dafa, also known as Falun Gong, is a spiritual discipline based on the principles of truthfulness, compassion, and forbearance. May 13 marks the day the practice was first introduced to the public in China in 1992. And it was Amherstburg's 5th flag raising in 5 years.
We wish you a very solid month. I hope you can take your message across this beautiful country and make sure that people understand that your cause is just, your organization is wonderful, and you are helping and serving so many people. Congratulations.
Prue then shared something more. He said a letter arrived after last year's flag-raising ceremony, claiming to be from the Chinese consulate in Toronto. The Chinese Communist Party has persecuted Falun Dafa since 1999, and Beijing has been documented pressuring foreign officials who speak out in support of the practice.
I got a letter purportedly from the embassy in Toronto of the Chinese government warning me to stop supporting Falun Dafa. I have never been told by a foreign authority or anyone in Canada to stop saying what I believe is true. This was the first time. I was taken aback and I was a little angry. We phoned the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and they came and they took the letter.
But Prue didn't back down. He said the entire town council stood behind the proclamation.
Maybe I'll get another letter, but it doesn't matter. What matters is that you are here. What matters is that you are listened to. What matters is that your cause is just. And we will continue to support you going forward. I am proud to say that our council unanimously supported reading the proclamation, raising the flag.
Prue has spoken out against the persecution for nearly 3 decades.
For 27 years, I have stated my hope that one day the Chinese government will come to its senses and recognize what a wonderful organization Falun Dafa is and will stop the persecution. For 27 years, I guess they haven't heard me. I would continue to support your organization and the freedom that Falun Dafa brings to many people around the world.
NTD News, Toronto, Canada.
And World Falun Dafa Day is almost here, with the annual Grand Parade bringing lots of color, lion dancers, dragons, and a message of hope and celebration in New York City. Don't miss NTD's special coverage of World Falun Dafa Day Parade next Wednesday, May 13th, starting at 10:30 a.m. Eastern, hosted by our very own Stephania Cox and Carrie Dunst, only on NTD. Be sure to tune in. Coming up, with China's influence operations dominating headlines, some states are pushing back. Founder and CEO of State Shield joins us to unpack some of the big policy moves his organization has passed to protect our rights.
I mean, these legislators at the state level are amazing. They're so patriotic. They really want to do their job. And it's such a pleasure to work with them.
More on that after the break here on China in Focus. Welcome back to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Beijing's shadow has been reaching across its borders and into the U.S., from buying up farmland next to strategic military sites to sending in agents to spy and steal, and even opening Chinese police stations on U.S. soil. But states are pushing back, passing legislation to combat the CCP. Joining us now is Joe Gebbia Sr., founder and CEO of State Shield, to unpack some of the big policy moves his organization has passed to protect our rights. Joe Gebbia, thank you so much for joining us. Great to have you on the show.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Now, there's more and more headlines, cases lately of Chinese spies in the States being caught. There's just actually a current trial here in New York of a man who's accused of operating a Chinese police station in the heart of Manhattan. That trial is currently ongoing. And you at State Shield actually tackle a lot of these issues head on at the state level. Talk to us a bit about that. What are some of the major policy work that's been passed or is currently running in the States?
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of those that you stated have been, those cases you just presented, have been around for a number of years. And it was early issues that we tackled. I run State Shield as a CEO and founder. Started the company about in 2020 mentally, when I saw all of the rights that we commonly took for granted being eroded. And I had a very, very, very significant concern that my grandchildren would never be able to know the America that I knew. So I began researching this. And it started with, was the Wuhan lab leak, or was it a bat? And as I researched this more and more and more, China ended up being the culprit behind a good deal of what was going on, not only when it came to COVID-19 and what was going on in that region, but around the world and how they were using proxies. So by the time 2022 came around, I began to really formalize the thought process of creating something to challenge. And I saw that the states were very, very limited in their knowledge of what was going on. I had previously been on the RGA committee and on a national senatorial committee and also on a national attorneys general's organization. So I had gotten it from three different ends before actually having to break down during COVID. And when we resumed meetings in 2023, I'll never forget, some of the governors still had opened offices in Beijing seeking to do more business. It was alarming that they were not aware of the degree to which China was sincerely a threat with a committed purpose of destroying us, and they state that openly. So we tackled some of the issues that you just mentioned, in particular police stations. We went after educating legislators, governors, attorney generals, state auditors. We did all of the constitutionally elected offices in the state government. And we found that their need to fill the void of what the federal government wasn't doing was immense. And they took it to heart. So we did a lot of educational seminars with a lot of the leaders of the legislature. And ironically, it's a nonpartisan issue, and it should be a nonpartisan issue. This is about the security and safety and sovereignty of the United States. But we weren't really able to reach a lot of the folks on the Democratic side. They didn't seem to have a want to hear what we had to say. And I did get one of my friends who was a Democrat in Atlanta, Georgia. I had invited several of them that I know well. And he told me, well, at the time, this was underneath the previous administration, that they didn't want to have to defend the president's position, and they found it more comfortable not to attend or have to confront it, which I thought was eye-opening. So what we ended up doing because of that, we specialize in just focusing on red states. And that's what we've got. So we're in 17 states now. When I say in the state, that means we have a lobbyist, which is so important. Because if you're going to pass legislation, you have to have an organization that understands the nuances of that particular state legislature. No two are alike. We're in 17 states, and the numbers look like they want to come in around somewhere to 32 to 34 pieces of legislation.
That's very impressive and quite fast growth there that you just laid out, and very important work too. I know John Molinar, chairman of the House Select Committee on the CCP, has been talking about farmland, for example. That's a big issue right now, and I think some of your bills actually target that issue specifically. I want to dig into some of the states here. Another big one is FARA, or Foreign Agents Registration Act, and I know you've been doing work on that as well. Talk to us about maybe some of the states. I know South Dakota has a lot happening, so what do you have in South Dakota?
Yeah, South Dakota just passed a, well, as we've been, one of the first bills we introduced in all the states was protecting the land from being purchased by China. And the original argument was always around a military base, and then it was deciding how many miles from a military base. There was no standard. Well, as we started to pass these bills, they would mature. And we would have best practices that we'd always bring in from one state over another and then just keep making it better. South Dakota reached a new high. And what they did is they took a map of their state and they not only put military bases, but they put armories and they put anything that had to do with a military installation or purpose. And then when you started thinking about how many miles from, you were always constantly overlapping. So they made it the entire state, which was a very, very, very good move. The other state that added significantly to this was Arkansas, under Governor Sanders. And she was the first state to actually do a clawback on land that was purchased at that time near military bases in particular, but were Chinese owned, and members were documented as being members of either the CCP or the PLA. The CP being the Communist Chinese Party, and the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, two key factors in China. So it's I mean, these legislators at the state level are amazing. They're so patriotic. They really want to do their job, and it's such a pleasure to work with them. The leadership is really strong. We're really blessed with what we have as far as state legislators. It's been a good learning curve for me too.
That's all for today's China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. If you have any feedback on the show or have something you'd like to see us cover, send us an email at chinainfocus@ntd.com. We'd love to hear from you. For on-the-clock original news coverage, visit us at ntd.com or download our NTD app. Thanks for watching. See you soon.